Weeks of phone calls, emails, begging and sorting logistics, and then we arrive at the brilliant Blyton Park circuit to rain. Tons and tons of rain. This is made somewhat worse because many of the cars on this test have no windscreens or doors. But we're British and made of stern stuff, or so I've heard. Besides, we're here for nearly a week, and in that time we'll experience every season of the year at least 2 or 3 times. The sun even shines at least once. Unpredictable weather aside, we're in for a hell of a time. We've got mad lightweights, wildly powerful heavyweights, dedicated track and race cars mingling with hardcore road cars. In other words, the making of an amazing few days. This is our track car of the year. We love this test. We start in the most British of weather, but the most American of cars. I wonder if the engineers ever tried its 305 section front tyres, yes, front tyres, in these conditions during its development.
Okay, so here we are in the very American, very mad, super aggressive Camaro Z28 in the worst conditions imaginable. But we've got limited time, we've got to get this done, so we are starting in this car. Such a shame, it's such a good car this, we've driven it earlier in the dry. You're not going to get a flavour of just how intense it is, but we're going to give it a go. So what is it? Okay, 7 litre LS7 engine, V8, 505 horsepower, normally aspirated. It's a beautiful engine. You can barely hear it because I can barely tickle it in this standing water. It's got spool valve dampers, so really trick dampers, same things you'd find in a Aston Martin 177. This car's done a 737 at the ring, and they reckon it would have gone faster. There was traffic or damp patches. They always say that, right? But anyway, it's done a 737. It's a serious thing. It's been properly lightweighted. It still weighs 1,732 kilos without aircon. But they've gone to town with it, and they wanted to create a real track day car. And this really good body control, the damper rates and spring rates are extreme. It's 85% stiffer at the front than a Camaro SS, 65% at the rear. It's a proper thing, and despite looking ridiculously huge, it's actually pretty agile, very impressive. Can't really attack the track at this point on turning, which is where this car is really good. But you can see it's got balance, the noise is fantastic, the sense of occasion in it is brilliant. It's just a really nice thing what they've done with this car, and I think they should be applauded for doing something so extreme. I mean, on the road the suspension is so extreme. Think GT3 RS plus quite a lot in terms of ride stiffness. It's just super uncompromising. It's fun, and this is not showing it in its best light. You can see it's fun, but in the dry they've made a track car out of a Camaro, so I mean that's such an impressive thing on its own.
So the Z28 is serious fun in the wet, and actually even in these conditions the fundamental balance, strong traction, great brakes and the superb drivetrain really shine through. Its lap time was set in much drier conditions with just a few damp patches to contend with. Despite GTR humbling in many US-based tests, the combination of a narrow track, cold temperatures and a bit of moisture resulted in a lap time of 105.1. This is 911 Carrera pace rather than GT3, but we're sure it would go much faster in warmer temperatures, and hopefully in the future we'll get to find out for sure. Our next contender couldn't be more different. A sober-suited hot hatch with just 276 horsepower and a very silly name. The Seat Leon Cupra 280 Ultimate Sub 8. Don't underestimate this car though, it is a lot more serious than it sounds. It's driven by my colleague Richard Meaden, who's sharing judging duties on this test.
The hot hatch market has hotted up considerably with this car and the Civic Type R giving Renault Sport a really hard time, and all fighting for lap time honours at Nürburgring. And what that battle has brought us is a really quite extreme breed of hot hatch. They've all got big power. Seat claimed 276 horsepower for this car, but they feel pretty healthy to me. I think Spanish horses must be particularly big. It's got no aircon, and it's got the sub-8 performance pack on it as well, so this is as hardcore as Seat get currently. It's an interesting car because it's pretty civilised. It's not as physical as a Renault Sport Megane, but it's focused in all the areas you want. It's got Pilot Cup 2 tyres, it's got really strong brakes, it's got brilliant traction, and the balance of the car, it's a terrific thing to drive. You can pretty much do anything you want with it, but it doesn't have that horrible edge that front-wheel drive cars used to have, when you had them right on the edge of grip at the rear particularly. They could be quite intimidating. So this is really good fun. You can set it up on the brakes and just flick it through these tight combinations of corner in a way that you wouldn't expect to be able to do in a front-wheel drive car. It romps on down the straight as well. We're doing 125 nearly before we're braking. We've all grown so used to Renault Sport dominating the hardcore hot hatch market that they've really just become the default choice. But the way this sub-8 Leon is performing around here is pretty compelling, and it certainly puts Seat back on the map.
The Cupra performs exceptionally on the track and logs a 107.55 lap, just 0.2 shy of the fastest front driver we've tested here, the stripped out Renault 275 Trophy R. It might look sensible save for those orange wheels, but the Cupra is unbelievably capable on track. You could use it every day too. You probably wouldn't drive a Nomad every day, but if you owned one, it would surely make you smile just to know it was tucked up in your garage. But just what do you do with an Atom fitted with Dakar rally style suspension? We're not really sure, but thought Blyton would be a good place to try to find out.
This car is Ariel's first supercharged Nomad. So they've taken the 2.4 litre Honda engine from the regular Nomad, put a supercharger on it, and power's gone up to 290 horsepower. And torque has increased to around 340 Newton meters. So that's some serious stonk for something on knobbly tyres. This car's got Ariel's kind of basic Bilstein suspension. So it's sort of dual purpose really, this car. At the moment it works well on road, it works on track, and you could do a little bit of off-road driving as well. I can't imagine quite what it would be like to look in your mirror at Silverstone and see this thing coming at you in your mirrors. But there's a part of me that would really want to be driving it and hassling as many people as I could. It's very soft. You feel the nose pitch, you feel it squat. There's so much change in attitude. You can just back it in over the curbs. That supercharged whine is so characteristic of the Atom. That manic scream, but everything you're feeling through the steering and through the seat of your pants is quite unlike any car you will have ever driven, unless you've got one of those Baja trophy trucks in your garage. It's so soft, and you can watch the wheels going up and down with the dampening travel. It's like a lesson in weight transfer every time you enter a corner. I think it's fair to say we all love the idea of the Nomad, but I think we've all been slightly curious what you actually do with the car. But having driven it today, I just think it's the ultimate toy and the ultimate track day terror.
The Nomad is a strange car to drive on the tarmac, manically fast but soft and pitching and rolling around like nothing else. It is hilarious though. It sets a 107.3 miles off the pace of a fast atom. But then again, the Nomad does things that none of our other contenders ever could. Ariel sent us a non-supercharged Nomad to have a play with too, this time on Blyton's rallycross circuit. It was a quite ridiculous amount of fun. Track car of the year has to have a GTR, a Nismo or a Track Pack or whatever mildly tweaked up model they've introduced this week. But this year we decided to go a bit further and get a real fire breather. This is the Litchfield GTR LM1 RS. It's a GTR, only more so, lots more so.
It looks a bit like a GTR, but it's quite a special one. This is a Litchfield GTR LM1 RS. That's 1 for 1,000, which this car comfortably has 1,000 horsepower, probably like 12 or 1,300. My God. Okay, so what is this thing? Well, no longer a 3.8 litre V6, it's now a 4.6 litre. It's got a pair of turbos from an Indy car. Hell. It's got a completely revised chassis. So, Bilstein fully adjustable suspension, Alcon ceramic brakes, Litchfield's own arms for more caster. The whole thing is just about as extreme as you can get in a GTR. It's mad. Okay, it's obviously got a completely rebuilt gearbox, straight cut gears. It's about 200 kilos lighter than a normal GTR as well. My God. It's nutty, isn't it? Okay, let's try and break down what this car's doing other than scaring the crap out of me. Currently running in about 1 bar of boost, which is sort of 850, 900 horsepower. We can ramp it right up. We'll wait until it dries out a bit before we do that. Oh my God. What I love about GTRs, it's just so easy to drive. Just drive themselves. That's not actually true, especially this one. Okay, so if you want this ultimate Litchfield spec track car with a cage, the carbon doors, carbon wings, the 4.6 litre engine and the gearbox that necessitates, you need to spend, well, you need a donor car and then another £100,000 or so, and then you can go and scare yourself and everyone else stupid at any track day you want. Jesus Christ. Even on low boost, the way this thing goes is ridiculous. There's hardly any lag and then just instant massive power. Let's see if I can get my head around it. So it's hard to believe there are many people in the world who feel like they need 1,000 horsepower stripped out GTR to go on track days, but they do, there's plenty of them, and wow, you have to say, it's a massive thrill to drive. It's slightly terrifying, I have to say. But if any car is going to take the power, it's this. The chassis actually, I mean, it will light the tyres up, but the traction's pretty good considering just the sheer forces available. There's still a bit of understeer, but it is damp. But look, touch the throttle and then you're oversteering. And then it just keeps on coming at you. 110, 25, 30, 40, 55. Jesus Christ. My God. This is hilarious. The Alcon brakes, thank the Lord for the ceramic brakes. Fucking hell. My God. Definitely too much for pretty much everyone. But I don't think you get bored trying to use it.
Sadly, this monstrous car was the only one to set a lap time in really wet conditions, and so its time is completely unrepresentative. Having said that, it did a 106.5, which isn't too shabby at all. More impressive still was that despite having to wait for an age to get on the power leading onto the long straight, it hit 158.72 miles an hour. That's nearly 4 miles an hour more than the McLaren 650S GT3 achieved last year. And we were only running about 850 horsepower due to the conditions. Earlier in the dry, I'd seen around 175 on the Spyder. If you like being scared, this is the car for you. From the ridiculous to the sublime, the simple, tiny, lightweight Caterham 420R.
Of course there's a Caterham in this year's track car of the year. There's always a Caterham. And we'll make no apology for that, because this car, if you like driving on a track, of feeling absolutely involved in what a car does, then these things still take so much beating. It's an old formula, but it never feels old. It's just got all the fundamentals perfectly sorted. Yeah, so much fun, these things. And this car, I guess, is no surprise we're huge fans of it. We spec this car. This is our long-term test car. Some of my colleagues built it. Fortunately for me, we then went back to Caterham to be checked over, which I suspect involved disassembling and then rebuilding it, but hey, we did build it. So what is the spec? Well, this model is the 420R. That means 2 litre 4-cylinder, 210 horsepower. So it's properly quick. They only weigh about 540 kilos. But we haven't gone for full lap time spec. We've got less aggressive tyres than the full-on track tyres, although they still work really well. 6-speed manual is an option, which we had to have because it's just such a cool little box. Limited slip diff, obviously. And so it's not set up to be the fastest Caterham that we've ever driven around here, but God, it's fun. The damp is hilarious. They just put you absolutely at the centre of everything that's going on in the car. You have to work hard to get the best out of it, but the rewards are so big. It's just so much fun. You sit right over the rear axle, so you can feel everything that it's doing, which is normally trying to overtake the fronts in these conditions. But yeah, there's just a refreshing, just a brilliant simplicity to this car, an unbelievable balance. And with this car with 210 horsepower, a sort of manicness, which is just really, really addictive. It's just, I mean, you can't have more fun in a car than you can in a Caterham on a circuit. almost doesn't matter if it's got 120 horsepower, 200 horsepower, 300 horsepower. Absolutely fantastic. This car is a real sweet spot. Like I said, the chassis isn't set up just for lap times, but it's so adjustable, so accessible. It's very dear to our hearts. It's ace. Still ace after all these years. And 100 years from now, this car will still be awesome.
So the old Stager remains a car that provides involvement, intensity and pure, uncomplicated fun. It is nothing short of brilliant. The lap time is a 105.7 and I can relive every millisecond in perfect detail. The 420R is unforgettable. If Singer reimagined Alfa Romeos instead of 911s, this is the kind of car they'd build. The beautiful and exquisitely finished Alfaholics GTAR 270. I'll let Dickie introduce this car and please excuse the small lump in his overalls as he describes it.
I think it's fair to say right from the start of this piece that I'm totally in love with this car. It's the Alfaholics GTAR 270 and I hope you'll agree with me when I say it's the most exquisite thing you can possibly imagine. It's based on a 1967 Alfa Junior and in much the same way that Singer totally transformed the Porsche 911, Alfaholics have for years been working magic on beautiful old Alfa Romeos like this. This car is the personal car of Max Banks, who's one of the proprietors of Alfaholics, and it's the ultimate expression of what they do. It's got carbon bonnet, boot and doors, it's got titanium suspension parts, it's got a 2-litre twin spark 4-cylinder Alfa engine on modern engine management. Every single part of this car has been gone through with a fine-tooth comb and done to such exacting standards. The quality just shines from every part of it. It's just got so much character. That engine is hard as nails, but it's got such a sweet power delivery. It revs its heart out to not far shy of 8,000 RPM. 220 horsepower and around 160 foot-pounds of torque in a car that weighs a little over 830 kilos. Hence the 270 name, that's its power to weight ratio. It's just the best thing to drive. I can't tell you how exciting it is to be in this tiny, tiny, beautiful car, but to be going so quickly and for everything to feel so together, and there's just no inertia in the car, there's just the right balance of power and grip. You can pretty much do anything you want with it. Of all the cars here, it's also one of the most road appropriate cars. So although Max loves his racing and he loves his track days, you can use this car every day. The only downside, if you can call it such, is that they need to lavish so much love and time on this car. It takes 2,000 hours to create a car to this spec and this quality, and that really costs. This car is around £106,000 plus VAT, which does make your eyes water a bit, but believe me when I say single penny.
You probably wouldn't expect the GT-AR to set a searing lap time, and its 109.75 is the slowest of the contenders. But for enjoyment, for the technique it demands, for the noise and the feedback, this Alfaholics creation is about so much more than raw performance. We absolutely adore it. The next car is something called the Cayman GT4. You may have heard of it. Developed by Porsche Motorsport, the same guys who gave us the GT3, fitted with a manual gearbox, to say it's captured the imagination of enthusiasts is a bit of an understatement. Here it is again, probably being brilliant.
So the Cayman GT4, what more can we say about this car? It's our reigning car of the year. We love everything about it, from the philosophy of it, with its manual gearbox, to the execution with the GT3 front suspension. It's such a big step up from a normal Cayman GTS, and I guess this is the sort of car that most of us imagine ourselves, dream maybe, of having as a track day car. Something they can use, we can use on the road, and enjoy hugely, but also that's massively capable on the track. And this car is definitely massively capable on the track. The strengths of this car, there's so many, I guess. The engine is really, really fantastic. As we've said countless times, and I'm sure Porsche are getting quite bored with it. The gearing is way too long. I mean, this is second gear, limiter at 81, third gear, slowly winding itself up, 112 in third. Just imagine, this gearbox is fantastic. Just imagine it with a shorter final drive or a shorter first to fifth and a longer sixth. You'd just be so much more involved with the car, because this car is all about involvement. It's so enjoyable to drive. It's fast. It's really, really quick. Around here you can be neat and tidy. And it's got the real feel of a GT3 about it, in the control, the way it changes direction, but also how indulgent it is. It lets you play with the balance. Or go off onto the grass. No, it lets you play with the balance. So you can drive just over its limits and almost have it four-wheel drifting. It's lovely. Or you can slide it around if that's your thing as well. So it does everything. Compared to some of the cars we have here, of course it's not as hard edged. We've got Radicals with mind scrambling downforce, Caterhams which are just absolute purity personified. But as a road car, extreme road car that you can use every day, and then come to the track and be as fast or as sideways or whatever as you want, is really good. Fantastic brakes, fantastic drivetrain. Please offer short ears somebody. I think Manti are looking at that. That would be great. But yeah, as an all-rounder, wow. I mean, wow. Awesome car.
So the GT4 is brilliant as predicted. It's also fast, setting a lap time of 103.8, despite being a car that's resolutely not about lap times. It's our reigning car of the year already, and it might just win this test too. The Mini Challenge is a vibrant, closely contested one-make series that's evolved over the years from barely modified road cars to this latest touring car style version. If you think front-wheel drive cars can't be fun, prepare to have your preconceptions blown apart.
This little car is just the best way to live out all your BTCC fantasies. It weighs around 1,050 kilos with the driver. Well, that's the regulation weight for the one-make championship. Has a 2-litre 4-cylinder turbo engine, which develops 255 horsepower, again in the one-make regs. It's got a 6-speed sequential quaife gearbox, no traction control, no ABS, and it's such a laugh. It kind of explodes the myth that there's no fun in front wheel drive. And it's quite a particular technique to driving these things. Obviously there's very little weight over the rear wheels. Front wheels are doing all the work. Yeah, front wheel drive is a real specialism for race driving, because some of it is counterintuitive. The way the rear end slides, but the way you have to balance it by pinning the throttle. That limited slip diff pulls you in either direction. The power delivery is very smooth and linear, doesn't rev particularly hard. But it's so addictive, just pulling a gear and pulling a gear. Don't crash, Dickie, don't crash. Considering the specification of the car, the price, which ready to race, is 37,000 plus VAT. But if you just wanted this car to do your own thing with, it's a few £1,000s less. It's an awful lot of car for the money if you compare its lap times with today's touring cars. If you use Brands Hatch Indy as a benchmark, these cars would just dip into the 51-second bracket. The quickest touring cars are a few 2-3 seconds quicker, but tail end of the grid, you're pretty much comparable with them. So for a fraction of the price, you've got a big chunk of the touring car experience and touring car pace. Purists might sniff at the fact it's front wheel drive, but it's really challenging just to keep the car balanced on a bit of a knife edge, and it's easy to lose the tail and difficult to remind yourself how to balance it and how to control it. We're on full wet tyres, and it's a fine surprising grip and traction. What a brilliant little car!
The Mini really is an all-encompassing experience and absolutely intense when you're driving for a lap time. It clocks a 104.25 and spits some fine flames along the way. You might not know much about the next contender, so let me introduce the Vuhl 05. It's built in Mexico, features an extruded aluminium and aluminium honeycomb chassis clothed in carbon fibre panels, and it's powered by a mid-mounted 2-litre EcoBoost engine supplied by Ford, driving through a manual gearbox. It's short and wide, it looks really convincing and weighs 725 kilos. Vuhl say it's a road car first and foremost, and hence it runs a pretty supple setup and Michelin Pilot Supersport tyres, not an aggressive track-based tyre. Still, a lightweight car with no roof needs to perform on the track too.
So, first impressions of this new contender, I guess. Well, it's £60,000, let's say, in the UK, which is a lot of money by anyone's standards for a car like this. However, the quality looks really, really good. It's just a really nice thing. I think they've got that absolutely right. Out on the track it looks almost square, it's so wide. Wider than like a 997 Turbo, I think. So it's a super cool thing. Okay, other stuff. Well, the driving position, very, very exposed, very upright. And that feels a bit strange to start with. The steering is very, very light. I mean, that also feels strange. It's almost freakishly light. You expect a car like this to have some weight, some grit to the steering. And the tyres are also quite interesting. It doesn't have extreme Cup 2 or Yokohama AO48 or anything like that. It's got Michelin Pilot Supersport tyres. They're a lot more progressive, less aggressive, I suppose. And that means you don't get the instant agility. I don't know, something like a Radical or a Caterham even. You don't get that aggression on turning. But overall, I love the sensation of being in the car. It's a really cool thing. The brakes are really nice. Again, I think the pedal is a bit soft initially, but then they're really progressive when you get into them, so you don't fear locking the tyres. There's no ABS obviously. Okay, so now there is one big but with this car. I don't mean that because it's wide. The big but is that it's got no limited slip diff, or rather it is an option. 750 quid. If you're buying one of these, it's 60 grand, get the extra diff. You have to get it. In the dry, I've been told, I haven't driven this in full dry yet, but a colleague of mine says it's really, really good, fantastic traction, very predictable balance. But we've had rain and wind and greasy conditions like it is now, and without a diff, you just can't get the feel from the car. It goes into oversteer quite a snappy way, and then you don't have the accuracy with this engine's delivery to bring it back smoothly, so it can make you feel a bit clumsy, and it shouldn't. You can't just get a whole corner right. It needs a diff to make it more accurate. They talk about this as a road and track car, and I get that, but it's got no roof, it's got no doors, so let's call it a track day car, shall we? I think that's really what it is. And it is a track day car. You want it to be absolutely nailed down on the track, absolutely honed. And at the moment it's just shy of that. I like this thing, it's a really, really cool car. It goes like mad. It sounds pretty cool with all this intake and wastegate noise. So they've managed to make the engine sound interesting. I just want more predictability from the car. But yeah, real potential. Just want it to make me feel less clumsy.
So this new competitor into the track day scene has the fundamentals absolutely right, but it does need some polish to fulfill its potential. It posts a 106.5 and we look forward to following its progress in the coming months and years. When they dial it in, it could be really, really good fun. The Radical RXC Spyder, on the other hand, is dialed in. It couldn't be more so. Powered by a 3-litre V8 that revs to 10,500 RPM and produces 440 horsepower, producing 900 kilos of downforce at 160 miles an hour, and with performance that feels like it wants to rip your head from your shoulders, it's an LMP experience for mere mortals. The noise, you will never tire of the noise.
About as close as you or I would ever get to regularly experiencing something like a Ford Cosworth DFV motor. It sounds fabulous. It pulls from right the way through to 10 with such precision. It just makes you tingle. Radical are one of the real success stories of our track day and motorsport scene. Company's nearly built 2,000 cars since it began. And since this car went on sale, they've taken almost 50 orders. To look at the car, you just stand next to it and think, this is going to be way too much. Too much grip, too much downforce, too much braking, just an alien experience. But Radical have been very smart in the design of this car and its weight distribution and its aero balance. And all of those things have been tailored to mimic the SR3. So although the performance is of a different magnitude, for an example, lap time wise it's almost identical to the new LMP3 category. To jump in and drive the car is much easier than you might imagine. In the low speed corners, you can trust the balance of mechanical grip. You maybe feel some oversteer or understeer. But as you build confidence through the fast stuff, you appreciate that that consistency remains true when the wings are doing the work. This paddle shift gearbox is by Quaife 7-speed transverse box. The shifts are instantaneous. Everyone's obsessed with cars like the P1 and LaFerrari and 918 Spyder. But for a little over a tenth of the price of those things, you can have this, which would murder them on a circuit. This is so addictive. Yes. Fourth gear, slight lift, back on the power. Woo-hoo! Downforce. I love you.
It's no surprise that the Radical RXE Spyder is crazily fast, but it's also so intuitive to drive. In the end, it can't quite beat the 650S GT3 from last year, which recorded a 55.8 second lap. But its 56.1 second time is pretty close and it feels utterly amazing. What a car. So to the Glickenhaus SCG 003. We didn't think it would show up, but it did for a single day, and typically it poured with rain pretty much non-stop, save for a very short spell just as the light died. We drove it in the wet and then finally on slicks, despite the temperature and the damp surface. You know the score with this car, devised and funded by Jim Glickenhaus. It's a GT3 style machine, but with aerodynamics more akin to an LMP prototype. It races in the VNN series held on the Nürburgring. And here it is at Brighton Park.
I can barely believe I'm driving this thing. Must be the coolest car in the world at the moment. And Jim Glickenhaus is just a legend in my opinion. He's built this car from scratch, races it in the Nürburgring. And we know there's a road car coming. Today we've got the race car. It's built to sort of GT3 Rex. but obviously we can't call it a GT3 car because they just can't build enough. The conditions are, I would say, treacherous. We're on slick tyres, the track's not dry, so I've got to be super careful. But I want to try and get a feel for this. I drove it in the dry already, it's damp here. Wow. So how can I describe this? Well, we've driven some GT3 cars around here, haven't we already? The McLaren 650S GT3 and the Caterham. And it's got that amazing usability, this car as well. Doesn't like the bumps there. It's a super cool thing. Oh, got to try and keep temperature in the tyres while I'm talking, not easy. The duck, it's so fast. In the ring it runs for about 480 horsepower. But we've got a bit more than that today. They've taken the restrictor off. It feels lunatic fast, but so drivable, like these GT3 cars often are. Gearbox, amazing, turning, brilliant. It's got a bit more stability than the McLaren, I think, on turning. It feels lighter somehow. It's running 1350 kilos. God, it's the brakes on these cars. Oh, love ABS in these conditions. Mega downforce. Unbelievable. Considering it's damp, you can just use the performance like you just can't believe. It's amazing. It's so cool. Wow.
To our huge frustration, we couldn't set a lap time on the slick tyres as the temperature dropped and the tyres just wouldn't retain their heat. Earlier in the day, in damp conditions and on intermediate tyres, it posted a 101, but sadly, we never got to find out if it could beat that McLaren 650S GT3 in the dry. However, the performance felt similar in so many ways, from the freakish braking power to the head-spinning high-speed grip and the sheer drivability of the thing. The Glickenhaus is a huge achievement and we felt incredibly lucky to drive it. When the road car does arrive, it should be something very special indeed.
Wow, this is awesome. This is proper fun.
When the sun finally set on Blyton Park, yes, there was unbroken sunshine on the final day, the Radical was by far the fastest car. Of course, that doesn't necessarily make it the winner. The stunning GT-AR pulled at our heartstrings, the Seat stunned us with its all-round ability, and the Cayman GT4 on 420R provided so much entertainment that we couldn't stop driving them. In fact, the Porsche and Caterham both came close to rendering the Radical's lap time meaningless. Such was the quality of everything that they did. But even if you discount the Radical's lap time, the sheer thrill it delivers is impossible to ignore. I've never driven a car with so much grip, braking performance and accelerative performance that remains this friendly and adjustable. It's the most intense experience, and yet you don't feel like a passenger strapped to a ballistic missile. You're involved in everything that the RXC Spyder does. You dictate its line, its attitude, and you can balance it with the throttle and steering like you might a Caterham. It really is that good. For once, the fastest car at Track Car of the Year is also the best. The Radical RXC Spyder deserves any and every accolade it gets. It is nothing short of extraordinary, and it is a very, very worthy Track Car of the Year. To check out last year's Track Car of the Year test, click on the left, and for this year's Ecote, click on the right. Don't forget to subscribe for more videos just like this one.